Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you guys are looking for PTC geocodes, including the latest set Chilling Reign, make sure you head over to the Potown store where you can use code Omnipoke for an extra 5% off your order. Today I'm back with Joe and we're taking another look, another deep dive into the meta results of the past couple of weeks. We obviously did this, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, where we took a look at the first weeks of results. There wasn't too many tournaments in that second week, but now we've got a couple more weeks of tournaments to look at. We can kind of see how the meta is evolving and changing as more of these tournaments go on. This time we also have a bit more data to be able to look at Trainer Hill as well, and obviously get a bit of a bigger picture on how much representation these decks are getting, as well as sort of their average placement, average points, and that kind of thing. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start on Trainer Hill. You can see on this little tab here we have the top 10 standard decks by their total points. I'm pretty sure their point system is very similar to CP in all fairness, so it's kind of representative of how these decks would be faring if we did have IRL tournaments. And this is kind of gives us a bit of an insight as to what people are playing the most, because you've got the instances, but also what's converting well, what's getting points. And as most people probably expected, Shadow Rider is up there. Shadow Rider takes the first spot pretty much head and shoulders above everything else. It has nearly double the amount of points as the next best deck, as well as double the instances, so there is probably some correlation there. But we can see that this deck is still performing very well. The average points are the second highest out of these top 10. So despite the more instances, it is still doing very well. We've also got Zacian Luke Metal. I feel like that's really risen up lately. Rider Calyrex, Eternatus, a couple of ADP variants, Urshifu Inteleon, Deci, Victini, and Mewtwo Weavile, or kind of the Dark Box style variant. So all of these decks are seeing a fair bit of representation, and we're starting to really get a big picture of what is, what's happening with this format, whether Shadow Rider was as broken as everyone thought, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just a nice thing to look at going into some of these results, just so we have a bit of an idea as to where the meta is in general. But yeah, I think the first tournament we're going to look at is the Chill Series 37.
Yeah, and Luke Metal was able to win this with a really respectable 14-2-1 record. We have seen captures as well as coatings come back into the list, as we saw Victini is squeaking into that top 10, mostly because of the prevalence of Luke Metal. It's basically unchallenged without the fire decks. So having a couple coatings in here makes a lot of sense. Guzzhal is a card you kind of want to play anyway, because Swell is really important to allow yourself to have Dauntless Shield online as well as Intrepid Sword. So having at least one coating makes a good amount of sense here. But yeah, 4 special energies in this build. Still playing those Crushing Hammers and the thick Tag Call package. I think we're really seeing a struggle between this type of list and then builds that are playing Pokegears and higher support accounts in general. This is playing no copies of Research whatsoever. It's just playing thick Tag Call and those Marnies to sort of supplement that. So I'm still a little bit worried about playing no Research. I still think it's a really important card to have in a deck like this, where you have such little, like, you have no Pokemon draw outside of Intrepid Sword, which ends the turn. And there are a lot of turns where you need to hit energy attachments and just keep up in that regard alone. So I'm a bit kind of sketchy about playing no Research whatsoever. Crushing Hammer is also a strange one. We know ADP builds are still hurt by that, but outside of that, I don't think there's much it really stops in the top 10. So I think Crushing Hammer for me isn't super strong, but it's okay in Mirror and it's okay in ADP variants. Yeah. But yeah, otherwise it's a solid baseline. We know there's basically just this list and then Pokegear Research heavy build as pretty much the 2 ways to play this deck, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I said, it feels like Luke Metal kind of, especially after that first week, really started to rise in popularity. So yeah, it's just going to be that kind of tug of war in between those 2 builds. We're not going to go into all of these, but the one I will just check from this tournament as well is the obviously the Shadow Rider that came second. This again has kind of been a war of attrition between these 2 decks, kind of which of these, how this matchup fares up. There's a lot of people kind of in favour of both sides, so I think it's always interesting to see how the Shadow Riders look, especially when on Limitless there was no given partner, so this could literally be anything given how flexible Shadow Rider is. But it looks like it's got a 1/1 Alcremie and it is primarily the Aurora build. I think we're seeing more and more of the 1/1 Alcremie in a lot of the lists. I don't know whether it's become guaranteed staple, but I think more people are trying to flex in a 1/1 spot. But I still feel like primarily Shadow Rider hasn't been nailed down to the perfect 60. There's still a lot of experimentation going on there. Some people playing Auroras, some people playing pure Psychics. I think the Path of the Peak build has started to drop out of favour a little bit. People focusing more on just trying to build up energy and take prizes rather than the disruption route. But every now and again we do see a sort of Trevnoir Path of the Peak build pop up here and there. I'm sure we'll probably see one at some point today. But yeah, other than that, no frills really. The one Sonya is kind of something that we've seen people mess around with. 2 Marnie, typically there's a lot of draw supporters in the deck just because you want to be finding these Calyrex as quickly as possible. But I guess Marnie isn't the best draw supporter, so they've just gone for the early game, trying to find them via Sonyas rather than a random Marnie, I guess. But yeah, pretty standard. I think most of these counts are getting to become the norm now. It looks like it's Evo Incenses over comms, any kind of split of comm, and also a second Rod is another notable thing. I think, given that you're playing a 1/1 Alcremie as well as the Zapdos, I'm pretty sure Rod is just a fantastic card in the deck, so you can never really disagree with a second copy.
Yeah, I guess they're saying it's better than the second Zapdos because hopefully with 2 copies you see this enough to just get Zapdos back and search it out.
Yeah.
I'm still a huge fan of Com. I think the switch outs are high. I think a lot of people play 5 of like either or, so slightly high on that side. I still am a huge advocate of Necrozma in this sort of build. I think ADP Birds is cementing itself in the top 5 of decks and is becoming as popular as regular ADP.
Yeah.
So respecting Moltres is really important, I think. So I would definitely be playing a Necrozma in this sort of approach. But this is definitely my favorite way to play the deck. Just an Aurora build. Gengar's definitely a very good one of at least. Zapdos is a one of at least. Alcremie, I'm still kind of not in favor of. But like you say, it's got some stopping power in it that does help you in weird spots.
Yeah, I feel like I still prefer this build with trying to squeeze in a 1/1 Alcremie over trying to force like a thicker Alcremie anyway. So this is kind of, I guess, that best of both worlds.
For sure.
But yeah, rounding out the top 8, there was an ADP-zation. I think ADP-zation is, again, like you said, starting to reappear and still is a fantastic archetype. But I feel like for the first week or so when we were looking at those results, not many people were playing ADP-zation. I think everyone was just kind of having fun with the new cards. Oh, I'm completely looking at the wrong tournament anyway. It was ADP Birds. ADP-zation's the next tournament. Then there is a Shadow Rider Calyrex. Victini making a top 8 appearance. Second, Luke Metal. And then a Spiritomb and a Pikarom to round things off. So yeah, pretty varied top 8 to be honest for this first tournament.
Spiritomb's an interesting one because it's got really low instances. It's only got 100 played so far, but it has one of the highest average points totals of all the decks. So Spiritomb's an interesting one right now. It's just behind Luke Metal as like mainstream archetypes point earnings. So that's one that we should probably be following throughout these results and just keep an eye on it because outside of regular ADP and ADP Birds, I think its matchup spread is like pretty good.
Yeah, makes sense.
So yeah, small bit of intrigue there.
Yeah. On to the next tournament, the Yosefi Thursday Madness number 3. Looks like an Eternatus was the victor here. Taking a quick look at this list, looks like it was the Weavile build, which is pretty interesting. Weavile in general, I think, is pretty much not typically how a lot of these players are playing it. I think E-Switch Moltres is far more common than the Weavile build, but I think this is probably the best time Weavile... Well, the most... I think this is probably the time that Weavile has seen the most success, is what I'm trying to say, because now there is natural reason because you're getting the energy back from Moltres. Before you had to like shoehorn in Cheryls and stuff like that as well. Now it's, you actually have reason to be using the ability here and there, so that's fair enough. But yeah, other than that, again, pretty standard. The double swell, trying to counter the Path of the Peaks, but yeah, other than that, nothing really exciting. No bells, no whistles, just straight up lots of dark Pokemon trying to do what Eternatus does best and do 270 when possible on turn 2.
Yeah, Weavile's an interesting one. It gives you more options against like Luke Metal as well, just giving you another type of attack against them. And like Sneasel is better than E-Switch in a lot of spots just because it's 30 damage that you can just put into play at any time. So it's a weird one. I think I still prefer E-Switch, but I can see why Weavile's like interesting. Because you're happy to see Sneasel in a lot of hands because you either insta play it, or it can just be like com fodder or whatever else.
Yeah.
So it's like in some instances a consistency card to getting the turn 270 in comparison to E-Switch, which is only good when you're like missing a turn 1 attachment, or if one's been knocked out by a Zapdos and you need to reload or whatever. So Weavile's interesting. I think we could see it more and more.
Yeah, definitely. Blazing Zeraora was the second place. I think there was another Blazing Zeraora that took a second place in the last video we did, but I think this is again one of the only instances of this deck, so it really feels like it's run hot on the day style deck. ADP Zacian was the one that I was mentioning in the previous tournament. Turns out it was actually this tournament that it got top 4 in. And again, I feel like this is actually one of the first instances we've seen this deck, but the deck's really been doing well. We saw on Trainer Hill it was still, I think it was 6th place, so it's still definitely being represented. I feel like just in that first video we did, everyone was just trying out the new stuff, seeing, what they could do. But as you mentioned, ADP Birds is hot on its tail and is actually ahead in terms of points earned so far, so there is maybe a new ADP deck that turns out to be better than ADP Zacian, but yeah, Zacian isn't going anywhere. Still a fantastic card, obviously. Another Eternatus in the top 4, and another one in the top 8, along with a couple of ADP Birds and a Luke Metal. Again, this was a bit more of a kind of nothing too surprising from this top 8, bar that second place finish for Blaziken Zeraora. Again, feels like a real flash in the pan deck in most instances, but nice to see it doing well there.
Yeah, I think then we move on to more Arceus sort of domination with ADP Birds in winning and also in top 4, and then lots of other ADPs also peppering out the top 8. And yeah, I really like ADP Birds. I think I'm basically between playing ADP Birds and Ghost Rider. Those are like my 2 favorite decks to play in this format. I'm still like a little bit against a lot of decisions in most ADP Birds list. Like, I would never play one Zapdos. I think it's like way too important of a card. And you constantly see lots of like one-of trainer cards in the ADP lists, whereas when I've played it, I've tried to just like simplify as much as possible. The Wrecking Horn is a strange card though, because it's nice in like a lot of matchups, but it's also good against like Desi, and I know I've played like double Morwile in this as well so far, and Echoing Horn's kind of a similar thing but guaranteed, which is nice. And it gives you a lot of ways to beat some VMAX matchups, which you don't want to like, you never really want to get through VMAXs if you're not hitting them for weakness. So the Echoing Horn plus the Morwile gives you those cheesy options to just still avoid what they're trying to put in the active and just get around it. So the game plan is still very similar for the Birds list. You just have to boss a lot less in certain matchups, which is just really nice, I think, to be able to just research and that sort of stuff. So
yeah, definitely. The biggest thing I like about this list is just the fact that it's playing double Zacian. I think that's been the thing that I've advocated the most in these lists. Is Zacian is still, even when you've got the whole plan of Zapdos and Moltres for the right matchups, that's great, but Zacian is just so good on turn 1 at drawing into cards. You're not going to get Intrepid Sword into energy very often, so you can't expect to do the kind of the donk stuff that Zacians usually do, but just being able to see 3 extra cards I think is really important, and I really wasn't comfortable with the 1 count that a lot of decks were playing, so I'm really happy to see this bumped up to a 2 count in this list. And then a couple of Ice Riders were rounding out top 8 as well. Ice Rider's a deck that I feel like has, well, at least on a lot of social media, has a really big cult following. A lot of people really love Ice Rider, and it's proving to be pretty good, but I think the rise of Luke Metal has kind of held it back a little bit. It still is. It was obviously very well received in the Trainer Hill data, but it feels like there was a time where you just really had to dodge and weave all of the Luke Metals, the other Zacians here and there. So I feel like Ice Rider is a very, very top quality deck, but it probably has it's probably a bit more of a risky play compared to like an ADP Birds or a Shadow Rider, because you have outs to some of your bad matchups with those decks, whereas Ice Rider can really struggle against some of the metal decks. It just doesn't have great answers.
Yeah, and Tate's actually been pioneering a really interesting list. He's playing just the Shady Dealings Inteleon. He's not even playing the
Yeah.
Ping Inteleon, which most people expect.
Hmm.
He's playing the heavy path, heavy stamp kind of build. So it almost role plays like a Pikarom, but
Yeah.
you have a better attacker, I think. Pikarom does get a result here or there, but I think it's way worse in this format.
Hmm.
The hit points is finally catching up to Pikarom for the amount. Like it's just too low in the format
Yeah.
these days. Um, and this Ice Rider is now the new like best stamp deck in the game. I think.
Hmm.
I would still probably play one Ping Inteleon at the minimal, and maybe even like a Leon in here just to have some extra push potential. But I know Tate's been working on this list like for a while. He's had placements previously with this approach, and he prefers just shady dealing for everything all the time.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty interesting list. Feels fairly defensive, but because you have such a quality attack along with such a good supporter in Melanie, it feels like you can be very defensive. So works out pretty well. So yeah, that's the Thursday 22 sponsored by Atlas. That was like we say ADP, pretty much ADP dominated there. On to the next tournament, we had an Urshifu Inteleon winning. So again, another new deck winning. Feels like this meta has been pretty varied so far. This is actually a Tapu Koko build, which over here we love to see just because Tapu Koko was one of the best. Well, we felt one of the best ways in the Battle Styles meta, then it just never really took off. And even now, we thought it was another great way because you could play Zero Aura, but the deck isn't even playing Zero Aura. It's just trying to go for that double G-Max Rapid Flow, 2 turns in a row from no energy. Obviously got the Passimian, the Telescopic Sights, the Inteleons to try and make the numbers work. But yeah, a pretty interesting list. I feel like I could talk about this for days because there's so many strange cards in here. But it obviously worked really, really well. We've got the 1 Ericas, which I've never been the biggest fan of Ericas, but there's a lot of decks that want to fill the board turn 1 and 2. Now you want to get, you want to see the Ghost Riders, you want to see the Shadow Riders, you want to see the all the Sobbles and that kind of stuff. So Ericas is probably in one of the best positions it's ever been in all fairness. There's no more big tag teams where you just play a couple of tag teams and you have to get through them. All of a sudden, people are extending their bench, so it is drawing a lot of cards.
It just feels good when you can shade for it, right? That's kind of the main benefit of being exactly one copy for the cherry pick moment.
Yeah, you'll be able to. I guess it was a card where it was so situational. You either had it in the exact time or not, but now you can.
You don't want to play 3 copies for the one turn that it's good.
Yeah.
You want to play 1 copy and actually benefit when it is good. So I like it in a lot of these Inteleon builds. To be honest, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then a couple of other fun counts: 1 Spinner, 1 Stamp, and then the 1 Viridian, 1 Tower of Waters. It feels like you've just got a lot of different options. Obviously, usually these one-off counts would be again pretty spooky, similar in a similar vein to why the Ericas is in here. You would need them on the specific turn, and you can't usually find them. But being able to shady dealings into them is really good. I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with it all if there was 1 Inteleon with shady dealings at the top, just because it feels like a lot of the shady dealings you're going to be using early game to get into the game, and then they're going to be evolving into quick shootings. So if we were able to just have one of those Inteleons at the top to shady dealings as well, that would probably make me feel a little bit more comfortable with these one-off counts. But it could be way worse. And to be honest, you're still going to be able to access them when you need them. You just have to bench an extra Sobble here and there. So clearly it works. But yeah, this is I think one of the more successful Urshifu lists that we're going to look at today. I don't think there's too many that have done amazingly. And it really feels like Inteleon has just become the way to play Urshifu, to be honest.
I've been super impressed with Inteleon. I've played it in Ice Rider, played it in this, played it in even things like Decidueye and Altaria can take advantage of it. Like, just quick shooting at the top end is just really, really good. And there is still a fear of Path to the Peak. I know it's not played as much in the Ghost Rider anymore, but there's still Ice Rider, and there's other builds that can play Chinchilla as well, and other Inteleon packages. So just having this safety net instead is really, really nice. I have seen some Rapid Strike Ursies actually playing Octillery in the thin count as well as Intel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of interesting to explore as well. I know you played in the Team Challenge where Tord was playing it.
Yeah,
so
he was playing...
whenever you see Tord making a list, it always makes you think twice about it. That's my most up-to-date Urshifu. I haven't actually played a lot of Urshifu, to be honest. I don't feel like its meta placement is great when I'm afraid of Luke Metal and I'm afraid of Ghost Rider. I'm kind of I find it quite sketchy. but it's still got so much power behind it and it's one of the best matchups into like ADP, which is quite good right now because that's still just a really popular deck. And if you combine ADP Birds and regular ADP's points, it's easily like in second place just behind Ghost Rider. So that's always important to note.
Yeah, it feels like Urshifu is now a bit of a dodge and weave deck in certain matchups, but yeah, it's still obviously as powerful as it once was.
And it did beat Shadow Rider in finals, which is interesting.
So it shows that it can be done. So yeah, there was a Shadow Rider in finals. We had an Eternatus and a Luke Metal top 4. And then, yeah, again, really varied. It looks like it was a top 16. Really varied top 16 overall. We've got another Blaziken Zero Aura down here. We've got, it looks like it's probably going to be a Green Strevnar. We've got the Dark Box deck. So, yeah, very, very varied top 16, which, again, I think is always a healthy thing. You love to see that.
I mean, when you get down to the top 16, their records aren't super impressive. You should, like, for a tournament this size, it's like the top 8 that is actually...
Yeah, they're the big ones.
It's actually good, yeah.
So next up we have an ADP Zacian actually taking down a tournament. I think this is its first win in this meta. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure we haven't looked at a winning one so far. And this is indeed a Bronzong build. So it's kind of still, arguably, technically an ADP Birds. But it's been listed ADP Zacian, I guess, just because there's more Zacians than Moltres. Also playing that one count of... the Amazing Rareization, which is pretty funny as well, I guess, for the matchups where you need to take out VMAXs that are not weak to one of the 3 types you're trying to hit for. So that's pretty funny. Got the Ditto in there as well. I know we've got there's a couple of people that are very big advocates of Ditto, trying to, just attach any energy turn 1, basically, an Aurora or a Metal or whatever, and then be able to get into whichever attacker you need turn 2. But yeah, pretty interesting build. Nothing too... fancy, to be honest. You can't really be too fancy with this deck because you're playing an extra stage 1 on top of all of the other stuff, so you have to be fairly stringent with the counts. But yeah, pretty as we'd expect with Bronzong, just a variety of different attackers hitting for weakness deck. Yeah, pretty good, to be honest.
Yeah, and the Vikavolt's actually, it feels like a strange card, but it's something that lets you like backdoor into strange wins. Like you can just buy that turn and boss Paralyzing Bolt for a turn while you build towards like Amazing Rareization or something like that. And Amazing Rareization for like a 4-prize swing is just such a crazy card, and that's actually like kind of a linchpin of this kind of build. As many of those games that you will have where you're just GXing and doing your normal ADP game plan. This Zacian is like the catch-all for like, I'll just blow up something, and that's just like actually important in the deck, surprisingly. So yeah,
being a 1-prizer as well, I think is very important, because obviously just being able to skew the prize trade in certain situations where maybe you've not been able to otherwise, having a nice 1-prizer that is obviously a bit of a monster is always good. Came up against an Eggrow in the final.
A really wacky Eggrow.
I don't think we've seen Eggrow at all in this meta so far, to be honest. So I'm actually pretty interested.
So it's not the Mewtwo package. It's a V package.
Okay, very.
So this is like the old, really early Eggrow builds where double was like a late game finisher, like in a lot of Eggrows, where you assume that one gets sacrificed, then you sacrifice a 2-prizer, and then the late game double is like the closer. But playing 1 Aurora, 1 Zapdos is like, you got the Gazala, so there you go.
That is
you
your
can
only tutor.
boot something. And Eggrow is actually very bad into Eternatus typically, or like quite bad into Eternatus typically. But having Zapdos is obviously going to skew that quite nicely. The Blissey, I'm not a fan of. I don't think.
It's difficult because if there was some kind of energy manipulation in the deck, it would feel like it would be perfect because you're getting all the energy onto the board and then you can just load up a Blissey in a turn. But you have to manually power up this Blissey. There's no energy manipulation. So yeah, the Blissey does feel a little bit out of place, especially when
you can voltage to it. But
but you can't.
I guess
it feels like you're not getting much value if you don't have double Rillaboom out already. And if you have double Rillaboom out, I feel like you're in a position where you're probably going to be winning in a lot of situations without the Blissey anyway. I don't know. But
yeah, it feels like you're hoping that you do like the first Blissful Blast for like 100 after Eggrow's dead, and then you get 3 of those grass energies straight back onto the Blissey, and like if they don't deal with it, then you can Voltage Beat again, and then it becomes that threat. So
yeah, potentially, yeah.
I don't think it's core to the deck, but it's certainly a way that you can like, I don't know, keep a threat in play
Yeah, I
that
mean, it
they
is.
can't really dust around. So maybe it plays into the double a bit better than just a raw double after 3 prizes get taken out.
Yeah, I guess they have to deal with it because all of it, like if they leave it and you voltage beat to it twice, and then you've got 3 energy from Blissful Blast. I guess
But
it actually does.
benefiting from Path of the Peak in this list is interesting because there aren't really enough decks that are actually pathing people. So this is interesting, despite all the abilities you are playing. So you pick your moment for the path.
Yeah.
Whereas before we assumed Rillaboom was mostly playing just like Swell, right? So this is quite different.
I'm pretty sure it was almost exclusively Swell, maybe a Wonderlab here and there, but yeah, pretty much exclusively Swell. But yeah, really interesting list to be honest. We'll have to see whether this goes anywhere. Rillaboom really started to
I want to experiment with this.
Rillaboom really started to amp up towards the end of last format, and it very quickly became like a top 4 or 5 deck in terms of positioning. In placements, it felt like it was a lot. It was very feast or famine, but a lot of the feast was very, very good. It was like XOs in phase 1 of a lot of tournaments. So, and there was a lot of notable players playing it as well, really representing the archetype. So, yeah, there's definitely something with the Eggroll Rillaboom combo. Usually, like we say, it's with the Mewtwo package, but this is a bit of a wackier package. But maybe there is something there for us to investigate. Looks like there was. Again, pretty standard. Well, not too standard anymore. I guess a couple of Pikaroms in top 8, a couple of ADP Birds in top 8, a single strike as well.
Single strike, not standard at all.
As well as a Desi. So yeah, pretty interesting top 8. I feel like again, it's just another sign of hopefully this meta being fairly wide open. A lot of different decks being viable, which is shown again by the winner of this next tournament. We had a Malamar Weavile deck winning. Obviously, Sander played this. A few weeks ago, kind of made it popular, or kind of introduced the archetype to everyone, and people have really started running with this. To be honest, obviously there is the Mewtwo Dark Box style deck anyway, and this is kind of has elements of that, but also is somewhat disruptive in the Malamar VMAX line, being able to do 180 and start chipping away at some of the different cards in your opponent's hand. Yeah, we've seen that Sander can do well with it, but it turns out it's not just a Sander crazy rogue, it's actually a fairly viable archetype in the format, it looks like.
Yeah, and being a dark type that is not weak to fighting is actually like a big deal, so you're not just afraid of a Zapdos counter. This should have one of the strongest Ghost Rider Calyrex matchups out there, like whatsoever. You've got that Dark Moon GX, which is so dangerous when you actually get there. Obviously, there's the potential to do it like turn 2 if everything goes right. Access too many energies and just like Moltres a couple times, attach a couple times, and red and blue. But that is like dreamer scenario. But outside of that, you have some good defensive options. You got your Stamp Malamar play. You've got your Cheryl option, which they have to respect at any point throughout the game. Even though it's a 1 copy here, you can push for it with like Dead A and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a scary deck with a lot of like power spike potential. So that's definitely dangerous. So yeah, kind of have to respect it, even though it's this strange amalgamation that relies on like tag call package for red and blue. I'm surprised there's no Guzzlord in here. Guzzlord is normally like pretty important for that turn 1 capture to guarantee like Sneasel. So that would be something I'd kind of look to weave in somewhere in here.
Yeah,
because I think that's more often than not the turn 1 play that this deck goes for.
Yeah. So I mean, the whole deck linchpins on finding Sneasel into red and blue turn 2. So, well, not linchpins, but your win rate is.
It's normally pretty core, I think. Yeah.
Very, very high. But yeah, taking down a tournament, pretty interesting to see, beating out a Luke Metal in the final. Again, I would imagine that was probably a pretty interesting matchup, to be honest. Trying to work around both of them being somewhat disruptive would have been pretty interesting. Shadow Rider in the top 4 along with an ADP, and then a Victini along with an Alcremie version of Shadow Rider, an ADP Birds, and a Urshifu Inteleon again in the top 8.
So the Victini is also multiple energy birds based. So the Galarian birds are just they are killing this format. They are super important cards in this format. So yeah. They really are just crazy cards, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, splashable attackers that self-accelerate and have type advantage on two of the three best decks or two of the three rock paper scissors trio, you can never really say no to. So yeah, it does make sense in all fairness. But yeah, it's interesting how they're being played in. Well, they can be played in pretty much everything. Pretty cool.
For sure.
Onto the Australia TCG Series 1 tournament. We had a Shadow Rider win once again. Again, nothing too exciting, just an Aurora build. Playing, I think, the only card that we haven't seen so far is Toggle Jammer. I'm not the biggest fan of, personally. I guess it gets around things like Big Charm and stuff, but I think...
the Decidueye, I think.
It's another one.
To stop the Parasol, so
Desi's
you can actually...
One that hits. But I don't think it's by any means staple or necessary. I guess it hits a couple of things, but yeah, I feel like the Aurora build is starting to hone in on a list, but people still aren't sold whether this is the best build in general. But yeah, it looks like this list is pretty standard, to be honest. Had an Urshifu Moltres to face off in the final, and actually did beat it. I guess they found more of their Urshifus in the Moltreses, but this is actually an archetype that was very, very interesting, that I think a lot of people were looking towards, to be honest, at the start of this format, because it seemed, again, it was another of these decks that hit two of the three of the rock paper scissors trio, but also it was kind of like people had messed around with stuff like Urshifuzation in the past, and this was a self-accelerating Zation. So I think there was a lot of intrigue there. It kind of petered out, to be honest, until now, but it turns out that it was able to take down a tournament in a build, in a way that, at least for me personally, I hadn't built it entirely the same way. I think I was on the Jirachi engine, but I was nowhere near on 4 E-Switch. I think I was only at like 2 or 3, so 4 is a pretty big statement. The Hooper in there as an early game attacker as well probably sets up really nice numbers for a lot of the Urshifu stuff you can do anyway. So I actually do like it as just a one-off attacker anyway. Yeah. And when we have so many E-Switch, it never feels like a wasted attachment, which is good.
Yeah, I like the way this is built. 4 E-Switch for me still feels like spaces, realistically, that you can devote elsewhere. Like 3 on the highest end, I think, is where I would ever land. But man, I've pulled my hair out with this archetype for like a week. I wanted to get something out on the channel about this list, this exact 60, and then I've still been wrestling with it. So the list I'm still not happy with, and when you're not happy with the list, you don't post it yet. So I'm still working on it. There's a reason why you're not seeing it in the top tables a lot, compared to other Urshifus, but it's in the mix. So yeah,
it definitely does feel like there's something there. Like we say, it hits 2 of the 3 weaknesses, and both of the attackers are efficient. The Jirachi engine in Urshi we've seen it does well. It just feels like there is some sort of blockade, I would imagine, around the fact that E-Switch is not a consistency card. I think it's probably one of the biggest things. It does naturally slow the deck down. But yeah, I agree with you. I do think there is something there, and I think there is still unexplored avenues with this deck. I don't think this list is too far off where the best list will be. But yeah, maybe there is still some tweaking.
I'll bring out a list soon, I'm sure. I'll eventually be happy enough to post a list.
But yeah, so a very interesting final. And then the only... there's actually 2 other decks I want to take a quick look at here. We had a quad Blissey V deck. I've actually seen this toyed around with in a couple of tournaments, to be honest, but never really breaking ranks. But it actually came 3rd in this tournament, which is pretty interesting. No partners, just 4 Blissey V, making your opponent deal 300 damage 3 times, which actually can be pretty taxing for some decks, just because... these Blissies kind of gain more and more momentum. The one scary thing to me is just the fact that your first couple of attacks really are going to be meager, and then as soon as one Blissey goes down, you're kind of back at square one. I feel like Blissey really is an archetype that appreciates energy acceleration, and even with stuff like Powerful Colorless, it feels like there will be situations where you just don't apply enough pressure before your opponent can deal 303 times. But it did well here, and obviously things like Path to the Peak plus hammers will slow people down. So there's definitely something here, but I'm not sold on it personally yet. I think it feels like another flash in the pan to me. But yeah, maybe there is more respect due than I give it. I just think the damage output scares me a little bit in the early stages, that you can't ever get into the game, given that you lose all your energy basically as soon as you, if you do miss a beat, you have to start again, which worries me.
Yeah, interestingly, its only loss in Swiss was Ice Rider. It did also beat an Ice Rider, but it faced a lot of things that just don't represent early pressure. Like if you face the Eternatus matchups, if you face other like aggressive decks, obviously Urshi can be aggressive as long as you don't find your weak guard. These sorts of things will just like pummel you because you need a turn or two to generate pressure, and there are some decks that just don't allow that.
Interesting. And then
I guess the other one is the other one's Intel, right?
Yeah, the other list I wanted to take a quick look at is Inteleon, because again we haven't seen Inteleon doing well so far, and it's an archetype that we as a testing group have actually talked about a little bit. So more than anything, this was one out of personal interest. Still running the 1/1 Frostmoth is interesting, along with the Melanie, and then the nice split of Inteleons there. Looks like it's pretty much all in on just trying to do that 160 turn 2 and never stop doing 160. That in combination with Path to the Peak is a lot of damage. It's 220 basically turn after turn, and which is essentially a Gmax. It's just under a Gmax Rapid Flow. Obviously the numbers are slightly worse in terms of where the damage is placed, but against VMAXs it's actually arguably better because you're two-shotting VMAXs, which is great. So yeah, a really interesting list, to be honest. Nothing too exciting. I wasn't expecting to see a 1/1 Frostmoth, I will admit. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff. I don't dislike it at all. No Marnie is probably one of the only things that really scares me. There is the stamp, but I don't know. Marnie's obviously great. But one thing that I have always said with Melanie decks is if you want to be running full research anyway, you want to be running Melanie to hit it anyway. So you do have to give. There does have to be some give in the support account somewhere, and you're not going to be able to research and Marnie and Melanie lots because games are just too short. So I guess we've just cut the Marnies, gone for the late game disruption of a reset stamp, and just said I want a Melanie every turn, which can't really complain at. It's basically Welder, so why not? But yeah, pretty interesting list.
Yeah, I think Inteleon's in a strange spot. It's obviously still not great into like Luke Metal by any means. Like I'm comparing it to Ice Rider, but Ice Rider obviously has a worse Luke Metal. Ice Rider's a worse, probably Zacian ADP, and Inteleon only has a Dodge Peak ROM, which is very few and far between at this point. Yeah. But I also think Intel has a much worse Shadow Rider because Ice Rider is really good at aggroing down like Gengar, obviously, and a lot of their early attachments you can like punish. You can hone in your damage like quite significantly as Ice Rider. And Intel can't really do that. You allow their board to sit for a while, and that's going to be quite dangerous, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it feels like it's just the more defensive option, but this list isn't really playing any of like the defensive option, the defensive tools like the Yell Grunts and the Hammers that we've seen in Inteleonists in the past. So yeah, it feels like it's trying to do the same thing as Ice Rider, but maybe with a bit less pressure in the early game, which is, like you say, a bit of a worry. But yeah, another interesting top 8. It feels like that's all we're saying today, and it's going to be another pretty interesting one. We'll take a quick look at the first place Shadow Rider list. This was actually a pure Psychic Energy build. No Alcremie, but no Auroras, so just all in on Gengar, Mimikyu. We've got a Crest for early game if needs be, and then just trying to attack with Shadow Rider. Again, I feel like an Necrozma would fit perfectly in this list, to be honest. Oh wait, no, it's not running Auroras, so completely ignore that. I don't know. That's still a condition that is bizarre to me, but yeah, pretty interesting. I think this is probably one of the only non-Aurora based builds that's been successful. I think the majority of winning Calyrex lists so far have been Aurora based.
Yeah, and surprisingly, this has beaten 3 ADP Moltres and a Malamar, so you can still beat the dark decks, I guess.
Yeah, I guess
this is
a combination of Horror House into killing threats into having enough damage to kill threats. Basically, being able to dictate the pace of the game is, I would imagine, what the majority of that matchup is. It's not letting them get into the game more than, because it feels like with a lot of the dark decks, as soon as they're able to get a second Moltres on the board, or take the initial knockout or whatever, especially in the first 2 or 3 turns, you just don't have enough time to get enough energy on the board to be able to respond on the Moltres, especially in a build like this where you don't play Necrozma or anything. You kind of have to hit and hope with Gengar in those kind of situations, which never feels particularly great. So I feel like you have to, in those matchups, really dictate the pace of play by aggressively horror housing and trying to buy yourself a turn or two where you can get 6 or 7 energy down with Underworld Door and then just start bossing up whatever's threatening. I feel like that's one of the only ways you can really go about that.
Yeah, and we've started to see a couple of builds that are going for like 4 incense and just saying, give me more of this card. The more I get into play, the more I just ramp and do everything I want to do. So I would still probably value a com over like 4 incense. Like even a 3-1 split, I'd play A-spec com probably first.
Yeah,
but
I think
that's just me.
I think com is incredibly important, especially in the early game, just because you don't have the headache of having to find your rod to be able to get more Shadow Riders into play if you had to discard them early game. But that, again, maybe that's just personal preference. But yeah, I'm also in camp Pokecom. The more interesting list, well, I feel the more interesting list overall from the tournament was the second place list. This was Shintaro Ito playing basically ADP Birds, but instead of a second ADP, a Naganadel Guzzlord, which is a really interesting one. A very, very spicy addition. I think essentially being able to, have the option of a second GX attack is fantastic. I think you're already. I get the concept of you're already running all of these energy anyway. So it opens up doors for you. I still think ADP is by far the GX attack you want to be using in a lot of situations, but there will be situations because you're taking 3 prizes on VMAXs anyway, you don't need the extra damage, you don't need the extra prizes, so you might as well just open the door for being able to use a different GX attack, which makes sense in pretty much every situation where your Moltres and Zapdos are just going to be winning the game for you anyway.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I'd actually seen a deck like this before Shintaro did well. One of our friends was playing it at an IRL tournament that I went to, and Naguz is annoying to deal with, It's chunky, it heals itself.
Yeah.
Which is like really annoying into like Urshifu. I think that's one of the weakest matchups for ADP Birds. So Naguz being an almost tech for that matchup, I think is kind of good. And Chaotic Order is a different path than Alter Creation GX for being a win condition in itself.
Yeah.
And can change your prize routing, which I think is kind of important too.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, a really interesting list. It'll be interesting to see whether this goes anywhere. I don't think it crops up in many of the tournaments we're going to look at for the rest of the video, but I feel like people will be trying this here and there, trying to replicate this success. But yeah, pretty interesting stuff. And then again, nothing too crazy. A couple of Shadow Riders, ADP, Luke Metal, Malamar here and there, rounding out the top 8 or top 9 it is for this tournament actually. Next up was a Pikarom winning a tournament, which is pretty crazy. We'll take a quick look at this Pikarom. We're going to start ramping up the speed, I imagine, with some of these lists because we've talked about a lot of them. But Pikarom is one that I think is worth looking at. Basically, remember the olden days of Pikarom that played Power Plant? Well, now Path of the Peak is the new Power Plant, and you do all of your cool stuff, then you drop a plant, and kind of say, well, I'm one of the most efficient attackers in the game still, even though I have, weaker HP now, I'm still doing 150 and attaching 3 energy. I can still paralyze plus path, and now stamp as well as stamp you, which is pretty broken, to be honest. It's actually really scary. Like stamp paralyze was scary anyway, so now also cutting that out even further is pretty gross. Again, it also feels like people are starting to disrespect path a little bit more. Not necessarily in builds, but in terms of Marshadow counts. So it's probably a great time to be playing a kind of path style deck. But yeah, other than that, nothing too crazy. No more hammers. You can't play hammers in the list you're playing 4 stadiums in. But I think even though path is probably just as toxic, I think a lot of people will be happy to see Pikarom not playing hammers anymore, which is pretty funny. But yeah, kind of just new age power plant Pikarom in terms of just trying to be efficient under ability lock and say, if you can't deal with the pressure of 150 plus a potential tag bolt or tandem shock or even just a Bolton taking 3 prizes because I haven't been able to attach a load of energy, you're going to lose the game. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
The only thing I'd love to squeeze is second Marshadow. I think I'd go to 3 Bolton, 2 Marshadow because that one of has to put in so much legwork to be
Yeah.
your late game, like part of your late game win, whether it's like Eldegoss boss or like Dede change for combo or whatever. Even like
Yeah.
Dede changing digging for stamp or something like that is important.
Yeah, you have to
So
rely on them bouncing it in a lot of situations as well, which people will want to do, but equally, anyone who respects Path will not bounce it because they won't need to, and then, like you say, all of a sudden you have to dedicate a spot to the Marshadow early game or be able to find it late game, maybe even under a Marnie of their own to be able to try and disrupt you. So yeah, like you say, it does feel like it has to put in a lot of work as just a one-off count.
yeah, you definitely want it in play as you're getting to like 3 prizes left sort of thing.
Yeah.
100%.
But yeah, again, I think the only other point of note is there was a Munchlax control. I feel like we haven't really seen any control so far, which is typically how it goes. I feel like control starts to crop up when people know, well, when control players know what they have to be teching towards, what they have to be, what their win condition will be. There's actually not a single new card in this. I feel like this is almost identical to some of the control lists we've seen in the past. But yeah, this is the new way to play control, or the new old way to play control. Primarily just, trying to boss, I guess, something up, trap something in the active, and run people out of resources. But yeah, nothing too crazy, pretty standard. I feel like a lot of people have seen that kind of list by now. But yeah, again, another pretty standard top 8, a lot of Calyrex here and there. Next up we have the Vaporeon bi-weekly, which again was won by a Shadow Rider playing purely energy, purely psychic energy, I should say. I think this is almost identical to the other list. I think this is the other list. I don't think was playing a stamp. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
I think it's the same 60.
Oh, it might be the same 60, but yeah, clearly something there in terms of an Aurora build, beating out a Decidueye in the final. Again, I would imagine this was pretty much down to parasols and them not appearing. There was
it played one Cress.
Well, yeah,
aggro Cress early game.
One Cress and Prey, yeah. There's a Dark Box in top 4, and actually a Center Scorch in top 8 as well. I feel like it's been a long, long time since we've seen Center Scorch anywhere near the top tables. But yeah, basically the Victini shell just with Center Scorch instead. Nothing too crazy there. A couple of Galarian Rapidash, Stamp and a Tool Jammer for good measure. But yeah, it feels like it's been a long, long time since I've seen a Center Scorch doing well, so that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, that's surprising to see, I think.
But yeah, again, another Blissey making top 8 as
I'm
well.
so happy about this Blissey. It plays Suspicious Food Tin, which I've definitely tested. So this plays a ton of heal. This is the Hyper Potion Tinny list.
Hyperpots and Suspicious Food Tins. Very good.
That is a ton of heal. That's really cool. I like that.
Very interesting stuff. That's funny, that is. So yeah, onto the second Yusha Cup. This was actually won by Decidueye. Again, Decidueye kind of had that breakout appearance where there was 3 in top 4. I think it was for the Limits event. And again, it looks like it's pretty much that exact same, or not exact same 60, but very close to that exact same 60 with the Inteleon package, which I think is the majority of the way. The majority of Decidueye players have kind of adopted this Inteleon package now. It really smooths out a lot of the sketchy matchups. You're able to deal with some of the more awkward techs that people are playing, and stuff like Big Parasol also helps against techs that or cards that are naturally in decks anyway. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. Taking down an Eternatus in top 4 in the final. Top 4 had a Spiritomb. I would imagine probably not on the same bracket as Inteleon. Actually, with Inteleon's, maybe with Decidueye's playing Inteleon's now, maybe not.
Lose to Eterna. Yeah, lost to Eterna.
But yeah, you have to imagine it's still pretty favourable. The only interesting one is a Cinderace down at the bottom in top 8. Cinderace VMAX, I still don't know.
It is baffling.
I don't know where the inclination is to play this, but this isn't the first time it's done well. I don't think it's particularly respectable personally, but it did at least make top 8, so we would be remiss to not at least give it a little shout out. The Lux Series Season 1 Week 5 actually had a it looks like a Tempo Zard winning.
Yeah,
which is something
back.
again, we haven't seen in a little while, to be honest. Tempozard, pretty much card for card how old Tempozard used to play, plus a Mew. I don't think it used to typically play Mew. But yeah,
ever since Urshi, it kind of did. But
yeah. But yeah, pretty.
It plays double stamp as well. So
Stamp is the card that sticks out to me the most. Yeah, just
double stamp feels greedy to me, but there you go.
But yeah, old school.
I think there's a place. There's definitely a place for fire decks in the format, and I would probably say that either Aurora Victini or this has the best chance because there's actually a lot less path in the game. I know we've talked about Pikarom and we've talked about Ice Rider and stuff like that, which has played it. But I do feel like there's actually a good reason to play this deck again in the format.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest thing that sticks out in this whole video has just been the sheer amount of different archetypes we've had to look at. I think it really represents a very wide open format. You can look at this top 8. There are 8 different decks in this top 8, which is, very, very impressive, to be honest, in terms of how wide open the format is. And none of them are Calyrex, which is interesting. So maybe Calyrex isn't quite as dominant as we first thought.
Oh my goodness. The Eggrow is actually a Delmise VMAX. I didn't even notice that. That's insane.
Delmise, there it is. Delmise.
We don't have to justify it, but it made it.
It did make it. A Zarude V and a Delmise VMAX. This really has been a wide open format. Onto the Card Cavern Trading Series again. Desi taking down Eternatus, and I'm not going to show the list, but you can see that it is an Inteleon build once again.
That looks like a free top 8 for Decidueye by the looks of the list.
There is all of those archetypes typically are going to be favorable without text, but yeah, pretty nice stuff. I know. Quick shout out to Eric, who we've seen a couple of times just popping up. I think he won a tournament or came second in a tournament in one of the tournaments we've looked at. So yeah, pretty good stuff. Australia number 2 had an ADP Birds taking down the tournament again. This is always one of interest to us over at Omnipoke, just because it's been an archetype we've been toying around with far too much. But again, pretty standard. The one tool scrapper is, I don't think there's been too many people playing it, though. I think it was in the list we looked at earlier on. I don't think it's typical, though.
No, but this is one of the lists I kind of like the most because there's the fewest one-offs that I see.
Yeah.
My biggest pet peeve is just seeing so many like trainer one-offs in this list. I see it all the time, and it's one of my pet hates. I would definitely still have a thicker energy count in this deck. I would play always 4 Aurora and always 2 Zapdos, I think.
Yeah.
But this is more acceptable as a list for me personally.
Yeah, pretty. Again, it feels like a deck similar to how ADP Zacian has in the past, where just having counts of your important cards, your game plan is strong enough that just getting to your game plan is kind of what matters in almost every situation. And like you say, the one-offs are a bit spooky here and there. But yeah, that beat an ADP Zacian in the final. Another Rapid Strike and a load of Calyrex making top 8. None of them converting to top 4 though, interestingly. And then finally the Sunday Open that took place yesterday. All 4 of the top 4 were Calyrex, so it had its comeuppance with Psychic or Shadow Rider winning out, playing a Solgaleo Lunala and a Training Court. So 2 cards that we haven't actually talked about today, but again shows you how varied Calyrex can be in terms of just being able to play all sorts. It feels like Solgaleo Lunala is the pure Psychic's version of Necrozma because it's just a big 230 for quote-unquote no real cost to be able to get rid of anything in the way and deal with things like Moltres and stuff pretty cleanly. Obviously, it is weak to Psychic, so it's a bit worse than the Mirror. But yeah, it feels like it's the way to play a Necrozma style attack in this deck, which is pretty interesting. I quite clearly like Necrozma. I tried to fit it into the list that wasn't playing Auroras earlier on, so I guess I'm down with it.
And this went 15-0, by the way.
Yes, it did.
And yeah, it actually went on a tear. I think its last 5 games were all against Ice Rider. And I feel personally that Ice Rider is a strong matchup into Shadow Rider, but that's just testament to how this build was, well, able to get so many horses into play in most situations. It's so simplified that you see a lot of psychic energy every turn to like max out your ramp, I think, a lot of the time, which is really important. So yeah, that's also pretty interesting.
Pretty interesting. So yeah, the last thing I'll quickly take a look at is just the metagame for the Sunday Open that we've just looked at. So this is the most recent tournament. Just to kind of, again, get a bit of a gauge of how represented decks are. And you can see that Shadow Rider and ADP Moltres are equally represented, which hasn't happened for a while. I think in basically every format we've had for a little while, there's been a deck that's almost been head and shoulders represented. Even if it hasn't had the win rate, it's been up there. So having the top 3 so close again shows pretty good things for the format in terms of viability for different decks. Looks like the win rates were very, very skewed in terms of Shadow Rider's favour though, but obviously there was that 15-0 that I would imagine has contributed to that, in all fairness.
Probably.
But yeah, there's nothing too crazy. I think the biggest thing that sticks out is just the fact that Malamar Weavile is within the top 10. Because it feels like it was a quote-unquote rogue concept, but it's beating out things like Zacian Luke Metal and Urshifu in terms of representation, which is really interesting. It's probably a combination of it being something a bit kooky, a bit new, as well as having great typing, and obviously someone like Sander people will naturally gravitate towards decks of his. So it feels like it's all of those things kind of combined, but pretty interesting to see, I think. I feel like the format is starting to get figured out, but it still feels very, very open in terms of what you can win a tournament with, in all fairness.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's easily like 7 to 10 decks that I think should win a tournament on any day of the week, sort of thing. They're like consistent enough / good enough / can dodge their 1 or 2 bad matchups and just power through, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I still think lists are getting closer to one another, but they're not quite there yet. Like, there's always going to be that stadium question mark around Calyrex. There's going to be similar things for Ice Rider. Tate's trying to show off this no ping list, and there's just other aggressive builds of Ice Rider that we didn't really see much since I think Inteleon's been taking over pretty much for Ice Rider at this point.
Yeah.
As being the most important way. Eternatus is pretty much there. But yeah, the stuff like the Malamar, the Urshifu is still being tweaked, I think, right now. And there's the sort of waiting in the wings sort of decks, like the Victini and the Spiritomb, and possibly even Rillaboom. Those are sort of archetypes that I would still keep an eye on.
Yeah. As
ones that could, throughout this format, start creeping up that little bit more. Mm-hmm. Maybe not quite into that top 10, because they just won't have the popularity behind them. But they seem, in the right weeks, like well-placed, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, really interesting stuff. In all fairness, like with the way the tournaments are, we don't think this will be a weekly thing. It feels like it will probably be kind of a bi-weekly video. So we will be doing this again in a couple of weeks' time to again kind of see how the meta progresses. I would imagine by then a lot of the list will look pretty similar. So I would imagine it will be a bit of a shorter video. It would be an hour-long sort of recording session, but we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, other than that, I've been Jack from Omnipoke with Joe, taking a look at these results, and we look forward to seeing you guys in another video. Cheers, everyone.